Hello and welcome back to Authentically Shawna. I'm your host, Dr. Shawna Burke. Today I am joined Matt Peterson, who wears two hats very well. One hat is a health hat. He is a certified yoga instructor. That's how we know each other. He's a certified Pilates instructor, a personal trainer, practices Kung Fu, and is also an artist. We met in 15 at Kripalu, which is a school of yoga and Ayurvedic practices, and we did our yoga teacher training there. And I asked Matt to come on and talk about these two worlds of movement and art and how he brings them together. So, welcome to the show, Matt.
I
I asked Matt if we could talk about our yoga teacher training. I think a lot of times yoga teacher trainings are done on weekends or your local studio and you do it in bits at a time. We did it in a little bit of a different form. We went and lived, it's in Massachusetts, and we went and lived there for 26 days. So tell me what that experience was like for you.
Sure. Yeah, we were just chatting about this, but I feel like the setup of the Kripalu training made it hit it was an initiatory experience because we had to go to the place Stockbridge. Stockbridge is like way out there. It was in Massachusetts, but it's almost in upstate New York. I had to drive for like several hours to get there. Beautiful place. Highly encouraged not to use technology. But, you could if you wanted to, but keeping it to a minimum is a big deal. I think most of us are glued to our phones, right? So having about a month with almost no screen time was amazing. And living there, there was a lot cooked up in the pot. And I think we all came out feeling like we had gone through an empowerment. Sometimes in Buddhism, sometimes they call certain initiations empowerments. So like, it's like you get a little something gets turned on.
Okay, so Matt would do this all the time during our teacher training. I felt like you came in and knew a lot about this realm, and I came in a blank slate.
Oh, cool.
And they would say a word, and I would look at Matt and be like, dude, what's going on? And I felt you helped me in so many ways break down and understand what was happening in the process because your appreciation and knowledge was so much deeper than mine. And I appreciated all of your insights because
Cool.
you'd be like, oh, and now I have this story about how this pertains to the Greek gods. And be like, how do you know this? Like, tell me more stories. How do you know this?
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot in the pot. There's a lot stirred up.
I wanted to ask you because I think there's so many ways to define things, but I want to talk about yoga and I want to talk about what is yoga? How do you practice yoga? What does that look like for you? How did this teacher training then change your practice and how you view practice? Because I will say you're one of the people in my life who is so consistent with practice. I think it has changed your brain in such a brilliant way. It's made you such a brilliant artist and teacher because you do practice so consistently and I'm still struggling with that. That's something that
Sure.
I still continue to struggle with and I look at you and go, "Oh, Matt is just doing it." And so whenever we chat, it's always you're like, "So how's practice going?" I'm like, "No. Uh-oh. I have to tell
Yeah,
Matt
sure.
it's not going well."
Yeah. Well, I definitely think part of there are cycle, even with consistency, there are cycles within practice. Something that I've found is that let's just kind of break it down into three things. If it was yoga, kung fu, and then gym stuff, either weight training or calisthenic stuff. I do them all, and yet I can only kind of focus on one. I synthesize them as best as I can, but um it there's different levels and I think to get to that deeper level, sometimes it's with the physical training where I'm on point developing a certain area of the body. If I'm going deeper with the kung fu, there's going to be less time for yoga. Maybe yoga has more lubricating the joints type, just being safe going into the workday type situation. I'm going to bounce from yoga to kung fu. I will say I prefer the terminology of yoga being a spiritual technology. There is a technical element to it. There's this cliche, trust the process. I think there are things that are built into the practice that we may not need to know rationally. There's always yoga studies going on. Like I'm sure that there are things in terms of what's going on neurologically when we go into deep meditation. I don't know as much about that because as a practitioner, I think it's more about exploring the varying depths of the practice. Kung Fu is where I got my start. I started getting into Kung Fu in 2007. And then when I went to New York, I started doing yoga regularly, found out about Kripalu, did the Kripalu training in 2015. So even just reflecting before we were speaking now, I was thinking I was kind of laced up already because I was doing work with my body and my breath. I think that I was able to progress in yoga quickly, maybe a little bit quicker than a lot of people.
Than me. Yes, I agree. I'll put myself in that category.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I certainly don't think I'm like a yoga master or anything like that, but I do practice and kung fu. I was always interested in Chinese martial arts. You know, even when I was little with Ninja Turtles or Surf Ninjas, karate and kung fu are different, right? Like this Japan versus China. But martial arts was always interesting to me. And then I felt cynical when I got to high school, as if I hadn't started soon enough. So why even bother? And then
Mm.
I met my friend Brad when I was working at the Gardner Museum in Boston as a security guard. And this guy got hired, and I noticed he had a kung fu shirt on. And I talked to him about that perception. I didn't start when I'm 8, so I'll never be a master. And he was like, yeah, that's wrong. That's totally wrong. Because you're going to be better than not practicing, right? I think there are a lot of mental blocks. I think that there are a lot of doors and there's a lot of obstructions that are made out of words and air that prevent us from going through them. So
100%.
when I met my friend Brad, it was at the tail end of college, and I was in a weird headspace. I had a lot of friends. I was extremely social. I was also drinking a lot, like more nights than not. And I was very depressed. And I saw some photos of me a little while back on Facebook from this sort of from like right before I started to practice kung fu, and it was crazy. It was like looking at a stranger. Who's that guy? I almost didn't recognize myself.
Mm.
And my friend Brad knew I was into kung fu, kind of dropped hints about being willing to teach me, then showed me some stuff. And I think I was just so bored with. Now I'm starting to understand that I was experiencing a dopamine thing, like my dopamine reserves were empty or something. And I was just so unsatisfied that I started practice. I was like, all right, I'm just going to do this and hold this posture for a couple minutes. Um, And then I noticed that there was a point where it would get pretty uncomfortable, but not painful. And then I would move through it and then it'd be like, oh, okay, cool. I've reached another level. And there was just a month where I started practicing every day. And that was a thing. He was a big proponent of daily practice. I think that's part of the Kung Fu thing, that it's only really worth anything if you do it consistently. If you do it now and then, it's meaningless. Like you're just kind of fucking around. And so there was like a period of me fucking around with it, but I was consistently I'd start I started to think about posture and breath. So even though my practice was sporadic, I realized years later that there was a period of time where I was sort of digging out the foundation for the practice, before you lay the concrete, which
Yes.
was breathing into my abdomen, breathing deeper, just bringing my shoulders back and down, kind of lengthening my spine. And then there was a month, December 2007, where I just practiced for a whole month. I just started to do this standing posture. Well, I practiced Xing Chuan. It translates to mind form boxing, or mind will or form will boxing. So the idea is that the thought and the action are one. Um, the premise is that it's like a consequence of creation is that there's a sort of degradation that occurs naturally as we get further from the source. In Taoist metaphysics, everything stems from the Tao, which is perfect. It's sort of like a primordial state of unity. And then there's yin and yang, and then yin and yang create 100 million things. But sickness and imbalance. A sickness of the mind and body are said to stem from imbalances of yin and yang. And in the Xingyi internal martial arts practice, we are attempting to plug into a headspace that's prenatal. There's a term, the monkey mind, for the sort of bullshit thoughts and ruminations that can sort of cloud our minds on a daily basis. Doom scrolling is an outward reflection of this degraded quality
Inner.
of mind. By focusing on the practice, we're able to let a lot of those thoughts go. And then when we come back to the body, um, I don't know how to describe it. It's not like the pipe is clear. It's like there's almost like there's like a clean there's a it's like a circuit. It's like think of like an outlet where like maybe the plug was like hanging out of the wall and the light was flickering and then you plug it in. It's sort of like a live wire. I practiced it for a month and my mind and my body started to change. I felt a lot more I felt comfortable in my body. I felt ease and an ability to wield presence. It kind of popped my charisma. And I just remember one of the big things was when I was in a party stage before, like there might be times where I was at a party and not really feeling it. And then going along, I guess I'll just hang out till the end of the night. It changed where I felt a lot more like, all right, this sucks. I'm going to leave. It made me a more direct and extroverted. And I think when I was younger, there was a lot more, I would get more stuck in my head. And, like maybe if I wanted to make a joke or like talk to a girl at a party, I would kind of get in my head and and either not do it or it would make it more clumsy. And then this sort of, for some reason, I just stopped doing that. I just started, like if you say a joke and it doesn't land, you just keep going. It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? I think and I think that stems from this sort of, it's a somatic, a more somatic modality. It's more physical. It's about presence and existing in your physical environment. There's nothing wrong with subverbal thoughts, but sometimes people get entangled in that. They don't really have their feet on the ground. It was just there were actually discussions going around for a few years where people were trying to say apparently studies show that not everybody has a voice in their head. Maybe that's real life NPCs. And that's bogus because I actually felt attaining a somatic modality, it's clean. Like it's like it's not dumb, but it is a little bit more. I'm thinking of like snakes and hawks. Like there's something kind of, it's a little bit more animal.
Mm.
Yeah, but it made me feel like home, and I did it for a month, and then I was like, "Okay, cool, this is my new practice." And then I committed to it for, like, 3 to 4 months, and then it became part of me, and I've been involved with these practices for too long. It's just they are who I am. Even if something horrible happened to me and I couldn't do the physical part of the practice, then I would be involved with the meditation or what I could do physically.
What for you feels different between Kung Fu and yoga? How does that feel different in your body
Yeah.
between those two practices?
Both are harmonizing for the body. Kung Fu actually makes me more assertive and aggressive. It's like a coiled snake that has the ability to move really fast. Whereas with yoga, it makes me more chill. I feel when I'm deeper in the yoga, I'm reducing physical inflammation and mental agitation. I think that it gives me more insight. It's different than kung fu because with kung fu I get insight too, but it's aggressive. It's like this person's a dangerous character. Fuck that guy. I'm not gonna deal with that guy. Whereas with the yoga, it's like, oh wow, this client I had had just talked about something, a sort of like urban incident with her son, and I'm kind of like, I get it. I'm sitting with it because it's like resonating with my heart.
Maybe I'm reading this into this, but one sounds maybe more masculine and one sounds more feminine. The yin
Yeah,
and
but
yang?
it's funny because yes, and what's funny is that my kung fu style is a yin style. It's an internal martial art. It's sometimes called a soft style. With Xing Yi, there's three internal styles. The family of internal martial arts, there's Xing Yi, Tai Chi, and Baguishan. And all of the masters kind of shared secrets with each other. So oftentimes schools will have mostly Xingyi, but a little Bagua. And it's a yin style because the practice is focused on the awareness of and cultivation of qi. External styles are Shaolin, where there's a focus on physical, like you're practicing hard, and practitioners develop more physical there's an external muscular development that's faster than the chi perception. And with Shingi, it's the opposite. I think Shingi guys tend to get sort of lean. There is physical development, but the chi sensitivity goes a lot faster. And it's considered Chinese alchemy. The first several years of me getting into Xingyi, I don't there's yin and yang phases because when I first started to practice, I was practicing a lot and it made me a lot more assertive, a lot more social. I was very outgoing. I was at the tail end of art school and it actually kind of made me shift gears where I had been very interested in putting together art shows. I got my degree in animation, but then I got really into kung fu and I was like, I can't just be in a room animating all day. I get energy from talking to people. So I went to New York trying to find a way to be creative in that. There's a other side of practice, which is where you're dipping into the principles in the everyday world. So maybe like being on a crowded train, and if somebody was pressed up against me, I would breathe into it. And I found more often than not, the person will move just by putting your mind in the point of contact. They feel that. And so there was a lot of experimenting with soft touch.
The Matt that I met at Apollo, and he's like, "Let's try this thing in class." And I'd be like, "Sign me up. What mischievous thing are we doing in class today? I'm in. How are we practicing being mischievous while doing yoga?"
Up, love it. Gotta be have fun with it. I do find yoga to be more yin, but it's paradoxical because my kung fu is a yin style. I am aggressive. I am direct.
That's something that I appreciate about you is you are very direct, but it's very kind. It's not coming from a place of being rude. You're an East Coaster. I think that's also a part of it. I think that's how East Coasters communicate with one another is it's a very direct form of communication, but you do it in a very
Yeah.
mindful way.
Yeah. Oh, so that's cool. My second teacher, Martin, he once described Xingyi as being a sort of the key to true movement. So, like he was saying, when like if you sneak up on a cat and like scare it, its whole body will jump. And humans be disjointed. Like you can be like your head can be somewhere else. Think that for me, the internal alchemy to me is a sort of there's like a different intelligence center or different intelligence centers. I feel there's more communication between my mind, my heart, and my guts. And so when I make decisions, they tend to be more on the money for me, because they're not getting stuck up in one zone or another. I think to harmon they like sort of so I don't know if that makes sense.
What do you think that's from? Is that from practicing multiple techniques? I think that's rare, to be honest, that about themselves.
I think a lot of people try to play characters and it's just not where it's
Tell me
at.
more about that.
So this is weird. It's a weird way of saying it. Listen, so I went through a phase where where I was like really interested in Charles Manson, not because of murder, but because I listened to him and he speaks with this sort of twilight language, which is very hypnotic and interesting. Sometimes has interesting things to say. So I watched a bunch of interviews with him, and I was reading this book where he was telling a story about he got a knife fight with a guy and he was gonna cut his ear off and he was like, "Nah, man, that ain't me. That ain't me." And I thought that was on point. I had an argument with a friend of mine a couple days ago, and she had said something really, really nasty to me. And then I was like, maybe I should insult her back. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. You know what I mean? That wasn't right. And it's not about because the book says you shouldn't do that. It wasn't an external voice telling me that. Like the sort of inner voice was like, no, don't do that. So I think authenticity is really powerful. I think trying to be who you are, trying to figure out and then manifest who you are is a way in and of itself. I feel like almost if somebody didn't have any works to live on after them, but they were totally themselves, that would be heroic life because there's so much outside of people telling them where to go or what to do. And I don't think that's wisdom.
And do you think practicing has made you aware of when that's happening? Do you think having consistent practice just helps your brain go, oh, that was someone trying to navigate my external
Yeah.
world without me having say in that?
Yeah, I'm pretty good at catching. I'm not trained in hypnosis, but I know a lot about hypnosis and a lot about suggestion. And there's definitely times where I'm like, yo, that's somebody trying to put something under, slip something under the radar. I think that for me, my practice actually refuge from confusion because I still get confusion, right? Like I'm still on social media. I think I've become very aware of algorithms being able to put a dent in the bend of my thoughts. But I got my practice. I feel like I'm able to reorient instead of getting lost in the sea of suggestions.
Tell me what your practice looks like in this season of life. What's a week chunk for you?
Sure. During the pandemic, I was living in Philly. I don't like Philly. And I was living with a couple guys that I didn't like. And then the pandemic happened and I was stuck there for a year and a half. After I was already like, yeah, I should probably get out of here. So that experience made me decide that I need to have my own apartment. I can't live with strangers anymore. It's not a lack of modesty. I feel like people are too dangerous in this sort of social climate. It's sort of like everybody has landmines about them. Like, I want my home to be a refuge. So, this is just a long way of saying I ended up plugging in with a family friend and doing carpet cleaning and upholstery work, which is not glamorous and I don't enjoy at all. But it's allowed me to sustain my apartment as I'm sort of shoring up certifications and attempting to sort of put together my program. Ideally, I want to be focusing more on. I want to be focused on the health stuff. I understand maybe having to have another job for a while um, to sustain. To have to pay for my car or whatever. But all this to say that we all have obstacles that we have to work around, and that's part of the game. The way that my practice has developed, it was always important to me that it be modular. So Xingyi and yoga, you could do anywhere. And then at some point when I started to get into the gym, it was like, okay, cool. It is really nice to have a gym, but I got into calisthenics. Like when the pandemic happened, can't go to the gym anymore. And I started doing intense at-home workouts, pull-up bars, simple equipment. So the practice right now, in the morning before work, I always practice. I always do meditation.
Tell me what meditation looks like for you at the moment.
Um, well, it's actually it's funny because it's actually shifted a little bit recently. There's a podcast I really like called Rune Soup. It largely talks about occult paranormal stuff, and the guy Gordon White, he offers courses in things like tarot and astrology. I was like listening to his work for like a good like year, and I resonate with this guy, and I started to take his foundation course, and within that, he had suggestions for a couple meditative practices, which I'm like in the process of integrating. He talked about the heart lock-in technique, which apparently comes from extensive research from a place called the Heart Math Institute. And the gist of it is that our heart center is able to sense, understand things in a way superior to our brain. So techniques where you're focusing on the heart can be utilized for problem solving, but also in general, there's a technique for engendering coherence. I think the point is that sometimes you have a day where you feel off. Maybe there was traffic on the way to work and somebody cut you off, and then there's something kind of riding with you all day. This heart lock-in technique is a way of calming the heart, like you're energizing that center and then utilizing the emotion of gratitude almost as like a purgative, as a way of altering the field around you. And that's been really interesting because I I feel I have a tendency to get agitated and contentious, and I feel this heart technique is a good way of kind of bringing it back. And also, I'm coming to understand this sort. There's this weird mystery of the world reflects what you're putting out. I remember even back in New York, feeling there were days where I was feeling off, and it was like, okay, girls aren't attracted to me today. Girls don't like me today. And then there were days where girls liked me, but because there was something going on, maybe on those days I was entered or something. So I've been doing that heart technique. On a daily basis. I tend to do yoga super simplified. It's based on the warm-ups. Warm up for a yoga class could be 5 minutes. It also could be 15 minutes. So that 15-minute version where I'm integrating things like a little core work, focusing on the back to keep spinal mobility, stuff with the hips and the hip flexors because I have to ride around in a van, and it was starting to give me a lot of pain in my lower back. So I have a kind of flexor sequence. That's my like pragmatic yoga, and then with Xingyi, oftentimes I'll do a little bit in the morning. The main practice, there is a link to Mongolian shamanism with like internal martial arts, and Xingyi's primary practice is this standing exercise, sort of like yin yang is heavens and the earth, and man is the bridge between. Where you're embodying this world tree. Typically, I'll do 10 minutes of standing a day, 5 minutes on each side, but that can also be broken up. So I might do 2.5 minutes on one side, 2.5 on the other. Go to work and do more later. And then with calisthenics or gym stuff, that takes up a lot of my time because I like to look good. So more often than not in the evening, I'll have sort of an exercise block that might be training arms or doing full body exercises like squats, bench, deadlifts, primary movements where you get more bang for the buck. But also, I've gotten really into gymnast rings. I don't know why. I just like aesthetically, I like love them. It just feels good practicing like that. Most days after work, there'll be either a module of exercising at home or going to a gym. There may be a little bit more Xingyi and ideally yoga, but I'm hovering over a yoga phase. I want to move into a phase the next month to have more of an emphasis on yoga because I want to be teaching. I haven't taught in a while, and it's I really love it. So that's the practice right now.
Tell me how you think being a consistent practitioner has changed you as an artist.
Cool. So I know that my practices have rewired my brain. Um, th- it's altered my it sounds weird. Altered my perception of time. And the way I describe it is that in astrology, there's a glyph that they use to represent the sun, where it's a dot. It's a circle with a dot in the middle. I often think of that as a model of ego versus self. So if the dot is the ego, then the circle represents this greater compass of self, which is sort of like the viewer. You're the main character in your movie. But then there's this perceptual you that's watching the whole thing. And so I feel like I'm in these like two places at once. I'm on now time, but I'm also on this eagle eye view. And that's altered the focus of my art. I'm not the kind of person who gets into a thing for a minute and then moves on to the next thing. Kind of realized at some point that there's just one story, which is my story, and I'm always working on it. I did an animation, and my thesis was a sort of animated self portrait. And when I left Kripalu, I felt this calling to continue the story because I was leaving New York. I had spent 7 years living in New York. And then I was just like, wow, there's so many adventures. And so I wanted to tell a bunch of those stories and then realized that there's this sort of really into dream. I kind of want to tell, it's sort of like I want to tell a story about my life which has that a dream-like quality where you're kind of now you're here, now you're there. It's a bit maybe a bit disjointed, but not arbitrarily that there should be like associative links. at transitional points, even if they kind of pop around the timeline. But also, and then on the negative side, I actually find it very challenging to do both the physical spiritual practices and art making. It's like it's kind of torturous. I think it's that when you get into the flow state, that's what you're focusing on. So if I was, cooking up some kind of art thing, and this is the most important thing, I get home from work and I start focused, it's a very good chance that I'm going to use up all my energy and all my focus on like that thing. Trying to integrate the two more perfectly is like the battle I keep fighting.
What are you working on? I feel like you always have a idea and are working on it.
I want to publish a book. I was always into comics. I actually wanted to do graphic novels when I went to Mass Art. That's the school I went to. And at the time, they were weird about it. Like they were like, "Oh, you should do illustration," but the illustration department was all hardcore painting. I was told that drawing things from my head was incorrect. I should own like sketchbook observational drawing. It's only when you get older where you realize that everybody sees things from their own perspective, and that wasn't true or useful. Um, and then by the time I left, they actually integrated a branch of illustration that was more drawing. There were discussions about like how drawing is really its own thing, and and that's more my bag. I'm not really into making things three dimensional. I love comics and cartoons. And I love more like Asian artwork, Japanese woodblock prints, the sort of like samurai drawings, geisha stuff. I love contours. There's a story that I've been working on for at least 7 years. It's what I'm always working on, but um, there'll be different hubs of focus. Oftentimes, for some reason, when the pandemic happened, I keep talking about the pandemic because it was traumatic. And it happened when we were in the lockdown phase. I felt we were in this limbo bardo space. It was like the world went away or something. It was kind of dark. They basically were like, nobody can meet up for Christmas. You can't do Christmas this year. And I think that was actually deeply traumatic. And I don't think just for me, because your whole life, those big holidays, that's like a beat you hit year after year. To not have that, it's like, where are we? But in that space of no time, I found myself reflecting, not surprisingly. I realized that there were spots around my timeline that were maybe it developed cobwebs or were a little bit hazier. So I think a lot of what's kind of interested me over the last couple years are shining a light on those spots, and through working with memory, in my mind or through rendering it in art, I'll discover secrets. I'm trying to think how I could talk about this, or
Yeah, tell us all your juicy dark secrets, Matt.
I won't tell you all of them, but
I'm just teasing.
the like, I don't know, like the true movement thing. I'm really into dreaming. There are different kinds of dreams. There are definitely dreams that are more arbitrary psychological stuff from the day. And then there's dreams that are compelling. There are dreams where there's mystery. And oftentimes that sort of dream for me, I dream more than once. Huh, cool. Yeah. I can get weird with it. Yeah, I'll get weird with it. So um when I was in Brooklyn, me and a friend of mine did a series of performance rituals. It had a astrological framework where every month we were doing a ritual around the full moon to pull a certain energy. And when we did the Venus ritual, we focused on the fairy folk from UK, Ireland, Scotland. And we created a fairy portal in my apartment. And I probably can't do it justice. It's probably sloppy to even bring it up. But I created this gate that was based on Tolkien's Mines of Moria. We transformed the space. It almost looked like there was a sort of dark garden leading into this doorway, and several people that attended got emotional. A couple of people cried, and so I have dreams where I'm at that old building and there's stuff underground. In the dreams, there's not just a basement, but there were sub basements. Maybe there's a basement and then there's like tunnels, like army tunnels, and then maybe even something deeper, like catacombs. I have a friend. Um, I have a friend who's a Norse spirituality. And I put two and two together. At some point in the past 6 months, I realized we didn't make a portal to Alfheim. Like in the Norse system, there's different worlds, and one of them is the realm of the dark elves, which are ambiguous. So dwarves, gnomes, maybe trolls, that's what I lit up. And somehow that apartment is on the other side. That's my access point. So that's something I've been exploring with work. Seeing those dreams are part of the story, but then there's also associative links from childhood, grade school, getting into the labyrinth or into the Maelstrom ride that used to be at Epcot Center, where it was this Norway ride where there were trolls. I'm obsessed with the idea of other worlds and connecting with other entities.
You are a master storyteller, so I'd like for you to tell us a story, something that is old but is now relevant again in our culture.
Like a couple things I was thinking about earlier regarding myth in general. This isn't a dodge. This is a preface. Is that I think mythology is always relevant. There are people that don't vibe with the idea of another world, which would be fine. But I feel like that kind of person doesn't want other people to connect with the other world, and that's fucked up. Uh, in I think it was like 2017. I was staying at my dad's house, and he had Time magazine, and it was a picture of a pregnant woman on it, and then it said on the cover, "Is the myth of the goddess hurting mothers?" And I was just like, "Oh my god, that's so fucked up. That's like some kind of black magic to act like the idea of the divine feminine is some sort of lie that's like hurting women, hurting mothers." I just thought that was like arc, and I think a lot of the problems that humanity faces stem from being disconnected from some sort of source, being disconnected from the world around us, and being disconnected from myth. And I think that hope for humanity may lie in the opposite kind of person, the sort of person who can resonate with different cultures, different stories, and build bridges between them. Uh, there was a quote in Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. He was talking about General Kurtz, who's the Marlon Brando character, and the guy says, "Well, he was an exceptional man. He had no sky above him and no earth beneath him." I read that in college, and when I got into kung fu, there's a basic concept: heaven above, earth below, man in between. That unity. So to have no sky above you, no earth below you, means you're nowhere. Like that's not. There's nothing cool about that. Welcome to the abyss. Welcome to dissolution. So I think that myth in general is important. I feel like if people were to find a resonance with true stories, not just the sort of slop that gets produced. I think when media is good, it comes from somewhere true. Then there are sort of breadcrumbs that could lead towards self-actualization, or people unfolding whatever kind of wealth is latent in them. And then another thing I was going to say is that I think hero myths are important, and they might be kind of coming up in the stars. My understanding is that Neptune is moving into Aries. Don't be surprised if over like the next 7 years or so, people are really resonating with like heroic ethos, which I think is positive because like that's what I vibe with. And then lastly, and I'm sorry if this is sort of scattered, in terms of stories that are relevant, I don't know if I want to open that door.
Was there anything that we didn't chat about that you wanted to share?
When I was in Philly, at one point I lived near this DIY event space that was anarchist. There was a day where there was a line of people going in. I was walking, I was like, "Oh, hey, what's going on over here?" And then the girl is like, "Oh, we're having an event about." I was thinking about internal alchemy earlier and how part of my mysticism has a very tantric bend. I'm not going to tell the whole part of the story, but when I got into kung fu, I also fell deeply in love with this chick that probably had borderline personality disorder. Apparently, a side effect of BPD is that they feel emotions more strongly than normal people. So I feel like it was like a prism. There was this hyper reality. It was super intense, and I had samadhi experiences where I don't know, ego death sound dark or confusing, but there were certain experiences that I had in that situation that coincided with me getting deep into kung fu. I think my sort of there were certain things like shifting around in my body, and both of those experiences kind of came together in an initiatory experience. So the earlier it was making me think about how um like in tantra there's this power that there's a power that can be attained from like two polarity intertwining, like the caduceus, the medical symbol. That's what the symbol represents, these two snakes that come together at the top in this sort of golden orb. In internal practices, something like that is actually going on inside the individual aspirant's body. People talk about channels, a channel down the center of the body, or maybe there's three channels. But at some point in the last several years, I got into these audio tapes called the Gateway Experience, which were developed by Dr. Robert Monroe. It was involved with the CIA in experiments um, involving extrasensory perception and out of body experiences. The basic premise is that using certain audio frequencies and induction techniques, that there's some kind of magic that happens when the two hemispheres of the brain are in resonance. And my long-winded thing that I want to say is that I feel there's life instinct and a death instinct. There's an instinct to connect and then an instinct to separate. And I feel like the sort of downward trajectory of the world is that sort of unbridled separation. I'm not going to get deep into it, but I was thinking about the Tower of Babel earlier. I think that social media has created division that's not natural. I think it's made it very difficult for people to not only form connections, but sustain connections to people that they love and care for and have a history with.
I have this question because this is a reoccurring thought that I have is I feel every generation has sort of felt like this is the end of the world.
Sure.
I feel that every generation we go, this is it. We're on the brink of collapse, and yet we still keep going. I the reoccurring thought in my brain is what gave us this courage to keep going. And when we talk about the master teachers who've come up with these techniques, I think the world was in the same place then as it is now in a lot
Sure.
of ways.
Yeah.
And that's why these practices came around, was to help us understand and alchemize and move through all of this external chaos that we have no control over. And that story is a way to connect that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
story is a way for us to bridge and connect and understand how all of these elements come together. And that practice, or doing some sort of practice, breath work, movement, you name it, is a way for us to clear ourselves, like you were saying, is to clear ourselves so that we can understand what's going on around us. So that when there's chaos, because I think as humans there's always chaos, that we can understand and not bring in the chaos, but understand that that's outside of us, and that it's our job to remain clear and as plugged in and as grounded as we can as there continues to be chaos around us.
There, oh man, what? Wait, okay, go back like a couple of sentences. Go back a couple of sentences because there was something I caught on to, and I was like, there was like a space in there. Okay, about the end of the world. I think. What was it? So ask the question again because I feel like it wasn't like actually a question. Was that a question? No, I agree with what you're saying. Yeah,
Maybe I think that exactly what you're saying with like social media, and how I feel that when I talk to people, or like the sort of zeitgeist right now is like we're at the end of the world. Like the world is ending, but I don't feel like that's a new thing. I think that every generation has felt that the world is ending, and that like we're destroying the planet and we're destroying each other, and things are all going to go kablooey. And I think that the combination of things that you're talking about, which is understanding story, understanding myth,
Okay, yeah. What's up?
understanding ourselves, and using these ancient practices and tools as a way to help us get clear, so that when there's chaos outside of us, that it doesn't overwhelm us.
I heard talking about the importance of myth. I'm not an expert in trauma, but it's something that I think about. And I heard somewhere that myth and storytelling is crucial to healing trauma. That framing, so, like, if you let's say that you have a traumatic experience, and then there's a sense of you're trapped in that going over and over again, that making art about it can help to give it a place to be. Yeah. So I don't know what the whole point, but yeah, there's something there. There's
I think
something.
it's a connection between the two. I think it's a connection of using art, which I think is storytelling as well, like storytelling as art. And I think there's practice, which is what you do also. Like I think that the combination of those is what keeps our society or societies in general moving forward
Yeah,
and
yeah,
not allowing this feeling of this is the end cataclysmic
yeah.
proportions is these are the things that have kept humans in balance for a really long time.
What was medicine? It was practicing, like, developing a daily practice was medicine, um, from a sense of disembodiment. It's when you find out that Santa Claus isn't real. I feel like for a lot of people, that's like, oh, so there's no magic, and there's just this dead world. And I think that that's oppressive and also not true. I'm losing my train of thought again. What were we saying? What was I saying? What were we saying?
We're talking about how art and myth are and
Yeah.
practice are the counterpoint to feeling like the world's ending.
Um, I feel like feel like a lot of the I feel like a lot of the like the new myths are actually like um disassociative. I'm not anti-media, but being saturated in media, it makes us feel disconnected from ourselves. It kind of throws us off center. I've read that when people watch sports all the time, a lot it gives you this sense of catharsis, but you didn't, but you're like, yeah, we won, you know what I mean? But you just were watching the game. When I was a kid, I got really into the Rocky movies. But then I did the Rocky montage, and it made me kind of walk through the world in a different way because I had my own story developing, my own myth developing. I think if people are able to develop practices that are nourishing them, then you're not as stressed out about what's going on outside of you, and maybe the sky isn't falling. I think the idea of, "Oh, the world's gonna end," I mean, someday, but it's very unlikely. I think more likely probably at the end of a cycle. I think that there are things that are shifting, and I think that's a little scary because whatever the world is turning into, there's a couple different ways that could turn out. I think if people are putting in the work, living life with meaning, doing things that give their life a sense of meaning, whether that be like dancing or gardening or like raising a family. Like kung fu means like anything you do every day moving towards mastery. So it usually refers to martial arts, but like like there's the trope about like the calligrapher. The swordsman is also like like a master calligrapher, right? And so like, I could see motherhood being a form of kung fu because I think that women usually go through a sort of like transformation where there's sort of like level up in a sense, but not like they're better than women without kids, but they have a practice maybe calming the baby, feeding them, lacing them up so that they can grow up to be people. I think that people need to not be black pilled. And I think people need to find a way of connecting with the physical world on a regular basis. I think it's crucial for sanity.
I agree. It sounds like you've been listening to my podcast.
A little.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we wrap up this episode?
I want to talk to you about practice. I don't want to like put you on blast. You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm trying
Put me on blast. Oh my gosh, please put me on blast.
to, when did you last dance? When was the last time you ever danced? Oh, wait. But you also have like, I think you also had, are there like, I know you got into an accident. Are there like sort of, do you have like are there like physical limitations from that?
Yes, to both. I feel a lot of my difficulty with physical practice has been injury related and not being able to move in my body the way that I want to. I think you had said this earlier of if I can't move in my body externally, how do I move my inner world? And
Yeah.
I think that's been a lot of my practice is understanding how to move my inner world while my outer world couldn't move.
Mhm.
And I'm just now getting back to dancing, which
Oh, yeah.
has been so cathartic for me on so many levels. Because when we were at Kripalu, a part of being there was there's other it's not just a yoga teacher training going on, there's other workshops going on. And a part of that is they offer classes. So I'm gonna mess up a day in the life, but we'd wake up, we had yoga class at 6 a.m. and then we'd go to breakfast, and then we had some other theories and lessons. And then right before lunch, we had this free time, and there were all these classes that were offered
Yeah.
that we could go to. And a lot of times we'd go together. There were dance classes, there were movement classes, there were other ways to move our bodies that wasn't a structured yogic practice. And I just remember I had had such a strained relationship with dance at that point. That was 2015. And I had finished with the Young Americans in 2010. And I had taken a couple of dance classes in college, but I really was struggling with this internal concept. And I remember you had asked me this question, and I'll never forget. You're like, "What role are you playing right now in the world, Shawna?" That is such a spicy question. How dare you? Putting me on blast, which I really appreciate. And I was like, I think the role that I'm playing is this ingenue
I
where I
remember
just
that. Whoa.
pretend, yeah, where I just pretend like the world is flitting around me, and I'm going to pretend to be unaware, even though I know exactly what's going on. And that's how I felt about being in my body and about dance. And I felt that if I pretended not to be good at it, or pretended that I didn't know what was going on, that I could go into these classes and just move freely without this notion that I had to be good at it because I had done this in the previous iteration of myself. And that was so freeing for me. And then I sort of fell out of that as I left Kripalu and uh, moved on to different things. And then in 2017, I was in a car accident, and that changed my ability to be in my physical body. And so when I talk about practice and not practicing, I feel like I've been practicing so much, but in a therapeutic way. So all of my movements have been therapy. All of my vision therapy has been therapy. Everything is with a therapy component and not with a relief or release. It's been I'm practicing to practice to get better at something, not practicing for self-fulfillment, which I think that's a big part of what I struggle with. Is if it's homework, I can do it. I'm
Whoa.
really good at homework. I'm really good at if I'm going to see someone, I'm really good at taking supplements. I'm really good at doing whatever someone prescribes to me. I'm really good at that. And I think going back to what you had said is it becomes a bandwidth issue. If I'm working all
Yeah.
day, if I'm
Right.
doing my homework, at the end of the day, I just don't have any more bandwidth to have a practice that I enjoy. There's nothing left in me. And I'm rolling out of that. I think that's the 7-year phase is rolling up to a close. And I have been dancing again. I have a new friend, shout out to Lindell,
Cool.
who has been inviting me to dance classes. And it's been really fun and really enjoyable. And I really stink at it in a way that is hysterical.
Is it a certain kind of dance? Is it like
Yeah, I've been tap dancing and I've been
okay,
taking a jazz funk class.
nice.
And part of it is my brain. I wasn't particularly that good at this as a kid either, was remembering choreography quickly. Like my studio didn't train like that. It was more like, we're going to teach you a little bit and you're going to perfect it and get really good at it. But the style that dance is now is we're going to teach you this whole slew of things you have to learn really quickly and then perform it right away. And I just stink at that. I think it's just because I'm out of practice and moving in my body, and I
Sure.
just was never good at it as a kid.
Yeah.
So I get to class and I sort of like how it did with you. Like I just look at Lindell and go, my brain does not remember that. What we just did 10 minutes ago when we
Yeah.
moved on, my brain doesn't remember that. Come on, brain.
Yeah.
You can remember. But the disembodiment of my brain and body working together is real. And so that's been a challenge for me is I had never felt this disembodied, meaning I might not have been great at choreography, learning it quickly, but I could use my brain to tell my body what to do. And I really struggling with that. Really struggling with my brain and body working together and not apart. And
Oh wow. Sure.
exactly what you were saying is okay, I can use my head, my heart, and my gut all at once. I'm in a struggle with that at the moment in physical practice. So I think the more that I practice, it will change and shift like most things. Yeah, I think that my physical body, I can now use it as a way to have a practice again, where before
Yeah.
it wasn't even an option. And things like breath work were really tough for me because of where my body was structurally. As soon as I did breath work, it put me into fight or flight. Well, everyone says breath work is life changing and it's so great for you. I do believe that. But because of where I was structurally and because where my diaphragm was, I feel like for a while my body has been in a very different space where I haven't felt connected with my physical form as a vehicle to practice. Well, I feel that's about to change. Like I'm just on the precipice of that shifting and changing. But that's been challenging because that wasn't something that I was good at 10 years ago, right? When I met you, that wasn't something that I felt that I inherently knew how to do. And then it has been inaccessible to me. And so now I think it's this new chapter where I get to find the accessibility in that.
That's great.
So we'll see what happens. But please keep asking me. Please keep putting me on blast because I like every time we chat, your way of understanding yourself is through your practices. Having been your friend for a decade, that has transformed the way that I view that. And I like can't wait to when I feel the same way that you do about it.
Cool. Well, I'm happy that you're able to dance again. That's great.
Me too.
Something that's been in my mind since 2020 is the absence of dance specifically. I don't like because when I was in Brooklyn, I was like plugged into this DIY culture and there was a lot of music, there were a lot of opportunities to meet people and a lot of opportunities to just dance.
Totally.
And I think I don't know how to fix that because I feel there's a sort of deficit of joy that's explicitly related to like groups of people. Last fall, I saw somebody posted a video of like it was like MTV Spring Break. I don't know what year it was, like 1992 or something like that. And it made me so happy. It was just like it was like a minute long video of like people dancing, but they were really like really feeling it. We all got to dance. I think it's medicine.
I think it's been a part of every culture
Yeah.
since culture existed. It's a part of the human experience, and we're sort of missing out on that. I agree.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to wrap it up. You've been listening to Authentically Shauna with Dr. Shauna Burke. The information contained in this podcast is provided for information purposes only and is not intended for the purpose of diagnosing, treating, curing, or preventing any disease. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.